Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular board meeting of Tuesday, February 8th, 2022. As is our custom, we begin our board meeting with the singing of our national anthem. We are very honored today to have a pre-recorded video of grade 5 and 6 students from Nicole David Thompson School singing O Canada. Next, we are pleased to have a video of a student from the Mandarin program, Xu Xiao, Harold Panbaker School, give the acknowledgement of the land. I think it seems that we were having some technical difficulties there with sound. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories and oral practices of the Blackfoot Nation, which include the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai. We acknowledge the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation, Region 3, and all people who make their homes on the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all trustees, superintendents, staff, and public participating in today's virtual public board meeting. Our first item of business is to approve the agenda for today's meeting. Ms. Miner, do you have any changes that need to be noted?
Madam Chair, the following agenda change requests have been received. The addition of board chair opening remarks to be added to the agenda as item 3.0 and the remaining items to be renumbered accordingly. And that item 9.2.2 construction project status report be removed from the consent agenda.
Could I have a motion that the agenda be approved with the proposed changes? Trustee Vukadinovich, go ahead.
I so move.
I'll now call on each of you individually to indicate whether you are in favor or opposed to the motion. Trustee Bolger?
In favor.
Trustee Close?
In favor.
Trustee Dennis?
Opposed?
Trustee Downey,
In favor.
Trustee May,
In favor.
Trustee Vukadinovich.
In favor.
I vote in favor of the motion. The motion is carried. Thank you to everyone watching or listening in today. I'd like to share with you this board's continued advocacy in relation to the provincial government's K-6 draft curriculum. We know that parents, grandparents, caregivers, and educators have been loud and clear in what they want in relation to the curriculum. We hear you and we continue to listen and advocate on behalf of Calgarians. In December, the Board of Trustees met with the Minister of Education. We outlined CBE's concerns regarding the content of the draft and followed up this conversation with a letter to the Minister. For those wishing to view the letter, as well as a one-page summary, please visit the Board of Trustees advocacy page on our website. The CBE's position, given the timelines ahead of us, as well as where the pandemic has put us, is to have no new subjects be implemented in the fall of 2022. The ongoing pandemic and recent Omicron wave continues to have significant impacts on teaching and learning. We need to see things stabilize before changing expectations for students with the implementation of a new curriculum. We need to put students first. The delay we are asking for would ensure the government has time for a robust pilot to strengthen the curriculum, to create and execute a plan to acquire and develop quality resources, as well as time for the ministry to develop a comprehensive provincial communications toolkit that addresses the needs of all educational stakeholders. The Calgary Board of Education needs time to build capacity through in-depth professional learning and to account for the new curriculum within the framework for accountability and assurance as outlined in the requirements for school authority planning and results reporting. We, as the Calgary Board of Education, look forward to working collaboratively with government to ensure the needs of students are being met. By working together, we can advance education where Alberta remains ranked among the top education systems in the world. For those looking to get involved in giving feedback, Alberta Education is hosting virtual curriculum sessions from now through the end of February. Please visit alberta.ca, curriculum have your say, or there's a link on our news center on the website that will take you there. Thank you to everyone for your continued interest in curriculum for public education. Next on our agenda of business deals with the results focus. Today we are very excited to have school presentations from Marshall Springs School, Shi Xiao Harold Panbaker School, Ecole David Thompson School, and Sherwood School. Education directors, Mr. Poirier and Ms. Howell, would you please introduce the presentation?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Hack and trustees, for giving us this opportunity to present to you today. Our focus is on our ongoing journey toward meeting our key action of acknowledging and supporting the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. Last year in June, all schools worked with their communities, students, and staff to make a TRC commitment to action. In Area 6, we heard from our leaders that to follow through on their school commitments, they also wanted the opportunity to improve their own understanding about how to apply that within their own leadership. This is also in alignment with the Leadership Quality Standard for all school leaders. Today, you will hear from 4 schools in Area 6 who will share how they have come together to further their learning in order to lead their schools to improve how teachers are using resources that accurately reflect and demonstrate the strength and diversity of Indigenous peoples. We are happy to introduce our communities from Marshall Springs, Harold Pannebaker, David Thompson, and Sherwood School. Thank you. And I just have the opportunity to share the technology today, so I hope that everything is able to hear. Here we go. And
good morning, trustees, and thank you for the opportunity of presenting to you today. My name is Sean O'Neill, and I'm the principal of Marshall Springs School. So today, we're going to tell you a story, our journey in Area 6 as a group of middle school principals. It started in our area meetings where we always had time to discuss our problems of practice. Using this model, we decided that we would have our own weekly meeting, using it as a knowledge-building community where we would discuss everything from our school development plan to how are you dealing with problem A to how you're dealing with problem B. But coming back to our school development plan, we discussed our Indigenous strategy and taking a look at the Indigenous education holistic lifelong learning framework and building our knowledge around that framework. Inside that, we asked a question around equity. Can every student see themselves and their culture in our classroom? This is where we looked at what resources do teachers have in our schools? What resources do our libraries have? And so we started looking at these resources and saying, if we work together and if we share what we have, we could build our resources much faster and much quicker for our students. So we developed two working groups, one in English language arts, taking out the resources, and our LLs worked together around what we're using and what was effective. We also then moved to our librarians and took a look at what resources we currently had in our library, what else was out there, and how we could share. All of this, of course, fits in with our truth and reconciliation that we had talked about earlier in our schools, the teaching quality standards, and the leadership quality standards. I'd like to take an opportunity to thank the leaders in Area 6 for creating the structure and the culture for this type of collaboration to occur. The principals that I work with are very inspirational, and together we have a collective effort that we can make a difference in the life of each student inside the school. So here is our story.
The Indigenous Education Task Force set the tone for our journey at Harold Panabaker. The message was clear: improving our Indigenous resources was a priority. This empowered the humanities team to act. As teachers, we know that when we use resources in the classroom that accurately reflect and demonstrate the strength and diversity of Indigenous peoples, we create the conditions for Indigenous students to be successful, and all students benefit. We audited our book room and identified gaps in resources. Teachers created a book club to share potential books. Together, we chose one Indigenous authored novel per grade level. We chose books which had compelling protagonists dealing with interesting conflicts to support student engagement. We also supplemented our nonfiction collection to spotlight both the historic and current contributions of Indigenous Canadians. Students attended an author presentation by Tim Fox through the Calgary Public Library's virtual program series to learn about the power of storytelling and identity. In future work with this task force, we will build on our existing relationships to continue collaborating and questioning. We will further diversify the literature in our collections to be more representative of the diversity in our communities. When students see themselves reflected in the text they study, as well as gain insight into the perspectives of others, everyone benefits.
My class read Fatty Legs by Margaret Oleman. I am 11 years old and I relate to her excitement about starting school, as I feel the same way starting a new school year. Unfortunately, that excitement dies quickly when she arrives at residential school.
Her story helped me understand how residential schools affected families and communities. It was important to hear Oliman's story, her sadness, and her strength. Oliman's name means a stone that sharpens in Zulu. I can see why her parents named her that. When we finished Oliman's Fatty Legs, the Broken Heart Art Project helps us to gather and reflect on the lasting impacts of residential school. This is my heart. My heart breaks because residential schools took kids from their homes. We can fix their mistakes by learning about their culture and listening to their stories.
Thank you, Gabe, Nate, Afton, Kyra, and the grade 5 class for sharing your beautiful work and your experience connecting with Fatty Legs. As Megan discussed, the Harold Panabaker Humanities team is working to embed Indigenous-focused literary resources that reflect Indigenous ways of being, belonging, doing, and knowing at all grade levels. The dedicated teachers at Harold Panabaker have met as PLCs and grade teams to build meaningful learning opportunities that spark in our students the same veracity for literature and value for the importance of representation that we feel so passionately about. Though we feel a deep responsibility to teach the complex historical relationships between Indigenous communities and the land that we now know as Canada, we also see an immense importance in highlighting modern Indigenous voices, stories, art, and experiences. When engaging in task design, we look for ways we can tie together these different but important access points. For example, when working with the grade 9 students studying The Marrow Thieves by Cherie Dimeline, we worked to activate students' historical thinking as they interpreted and connected with the fictional characters displayed in the dystopian experience of the book. Students examined the parallels between the book's themes of trauma and identity and Indigenous peoples' racialized experiences in Canadian systems and institutions. The students were also able to see the characters as teenagers, much like themselves, navigating relationships, connecting with their cultural identities, and understanding their place in the world. By deepening personal connections, students began to empathize with the complex emotions the characters expressed as they fled their captors and tried to reconnect with their culture. I would now like to introduce Chloe, an amazing grade 9 student who will be speaking to you about her experience engaging with the Marrow Thieves text and sharing her Instagram project with you.
I think it's important to read books by Indigenous authors to remember all that Indigenous people have been through and how unfairly they've been treated. It's important for us to learn about Indigenous history in Canada so we can work towards reconciliation. After reading the book, I wrote an essay that made connections between the Marrow Thieves novel and the Starlight Tours. I found similarities between the real-life police brutality towards Indigenous people that occurred during the Starlight Tours and the police brutality the recruiters showed the characters in the book. I also saw a connection between the danger and death the victims of the Starlight Tours faced as they tried to return home after being left in the cold, and the characters struggled through the wilderness as they ran from the recruiters and tried to find their community. I made an Instagram character profile for Riri. I connected with this character because she was so sweet, and the author did a great job of building an emotional connection between the reader and Riri's character.
Thank you, Chloe. The Indigenous Education Task Force has been a core piece of work this year and supported our school development plan's goals for literacy and well-being. Our teachers have built the collective capacity through PLC work. We have supported students by providing modern, inclusive tests which support truth and reconciliation. We shared our initiatives with our parent council, and they were very supportive of our plans. As we move forward with the work, we engage with our students to set more tests which represent them. The staff of Pennebaker look forward to deepening our relationships with the teams at other schools and continuing to challenge ourselves with the best practices in teaching literature.
There's clear direction in the education plan to utilize a professional learning network to support CB staff to acquire and apply foundational knowledge about First Nations, Métis, and Inuit for the benefit of all students. This collaborative endeavor moves us in a good way in furthering this direction. Because each school environment is unique, there can be no one-size-fits-all approach to this work. However, continuing to strengthen a network of support across our schools to explore best practice can assist in enhancing efficacy, capacity of our teachers to benefit all students. Next steps needed to collectively germinate this seed is to focus on further inquiry, including an examination of tools, resources, practices, and processes that have been or promise to be successful in this work. While our 25 self-identified Indigenous learners at David Thompson School have done well academically, in previous interviews with them, they stated that they did not see themselves in their learning. Data analysis will be key in determining growth. In particular, we'll triangulate our perception data using the Alberta Education Assurance Survey, the CVE Student Survey, and the Our School Survey to see trends in student sense of belonging, student understanding of their own culture and the culture of others, as well as student engagement. Further, David Thompson School will conduct focus groups to garner further feedback. In addition, as an English and French immersion dual track middle school, it is important for David Thompson School to reach out to build a similar network with other French immersion schools. Looking at the big picture, we believe we'll be able to leverage understandings from this network to enhance multicultural and LGBTQ representation, belonging, and voice to better reflect our school population. Utilizing the recently shared culture commons along with a robust and collaborative learning network similar to what we've shared today has the potential to bear fruit as we use our experience to refine this process.
In acknowledgement and support of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we have been meeting together as a committee of principals and library assistants to find out what resources we have in our school learning commons. It has been a wonderful experience to be part of this collaboration with other principals and library assistants. When we come together to meet and discuss different books and authors, we all help and learn from each other. Some of the benefits others have gained from this collaboration are knowing what resources are in the school so that they can use their teaching. Seeing the resources other schools have has helped another school purchase books for their library. Our next step is to ensure all resources are identified and easily found in the library, and to create a common marking on each item so they can easily be spotted on the shelf. This will allow the resources to be easily identified in the Learning Commons.
For the past few years at Sherwood School, we have focused our work on supporting our self-identified Indigenous students in Indigenous ways of knowing, working alongside our System Indigenous team as well as our Indigenous education learning leaders. Stories are powerful pedagogical tools that help learners understand their history and the environments in which they live in. Stories have a way of inviting us in to help us to teach important lessons, sharing and transmitting central knowledge, and providing a cultural framework. They help us to come together with common understandings and to open important dialogue to provide a collective lived experience. This has been a huge part of our school development plan work at Sherwood School as we work through literacy and increasing our collections in our Learning Commons. In our Area 6 Problem of Practice group, as we discussed as principals what resources we were using, we uncovered that we had similar resources and wondered what else was out there. Our work as we move forward will be to add to our collections supported by our system resources, as well as vetting those, uncovering updated current resources collectively. Our work is centered around our students who self-identify as Indigenous, as well as a more holistic framework focused on including all students through task design and creating learning intentions using resources that provide all students the invitation to the work. As we progress, the diverse resources will become an extension of this work to include a more multicultural representation with language diversity and inclusion at the core. Our next steps involving deepening our collaboration, looking at working with our elders and knowledge keepers, as well as the CBE Indigenous education team, connecting this authentic work to the program of studies and the work we do daily with students. Additionally, this will allow us to open conversations of reconciliation through education with a key purpose behind this work. At the core of our work, the holistic lifelong learning framework, spirit, heart, body, and mind, and this journey will allow us to build ongoing professional relationships between our teachers alongside our system experts, building relationships through literature, actively collecting the resources to the outcomes through collaborative planning and sharing of tasks and activities.
Sharak, trustees, the work this presentation was illustrating is a direct result of school support model and the new approach we have adopted in our area meetings. Over the years, the area meetings have evolved from diffusion of information to professional development to their current form, where principals can meet together to work on their school development plan and gather around common problems of practice. We are grateful for the work of Principal Lee, Principal O'Neill, Principal Cohen, and Principal Cuban, and their respective faculty and staff for taking on the challenge of finding rich resources to support Indigenous education in their school and increase academic success as laid out in Result 2. We are also thankful for their hard work in putting this presentation together. Merci, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Trustee Close and Vukadinovich, as the presentation tools are in your wards, would you please each take a minute and thank those involved in the presentation for the board today? Trustee Close, go ahead.
Delighted to, on behalf of actually the board, and I know Trustee Vukadinovich will also comment, but this is why we're here, and it's just so exciting to hear your stories. And Martin and Michelle, please extend our thanks to the incredible leaders and students in Area 6. I'm not going to go through the list of names, but what a wonderful way to start our meeting with the Canada, the land acknowledgement, and even though there was technical difficulties, we all know what those actions mean, and so very meaningful. I just want to highlight three takeaways that I'm very excited about is the meaningful conversation and learning opportunity for staff and students. To have that conversation around the resources that you need and identify what students need in order for that storytelling aspect, but also so that they feel represented, just grabbed my heart and my head. And also the comments around that each school is unique, so you need to have that opportunity to be able to develop what you need in order to meet student needs. So very, very taken with both the staff and the students' presentation. Love the Broken Heart project. Oh my goodness, I would love to see more detail around that. And of course, the power of storytelling. And so thank you. So please extend our thanks. Susan will speak as well to all of the staff and students and yourselves for the work that you do in support of student success. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. I also wanted to extend my thanks to Martin Poirier and as well to Michelle Howell. And thank you for the wonderful presentations from the students, very heartwarming, and from the teachers. And because at the CDE, learning is our central purpose, I was just heartened to see that how this journey is unfolding, that it's going to be a journey of continuous improvement. It's not a one and done. It's something that we're just going to keep working on and learning and improving and learning from each other, and the collaboration between teachers and students and our Indigenous knowledge keepers. It gives me hope for the future. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Next on our agenda is the annual monitoring of Operational Expectations 3 instructional program. Chief Yusey, would you please introduce the report?
Yes, well, thank you very much, Madam Chair and trustees. Before I turn my attention to the report, I too would like to extend my appreciation and congratulations to the school administrators and staff, and certainly to the education directors, Poirier and Howe, for that wonderful, excellent presentation. I certainly echo the comments made by trustees that this is the reason why we're here today and every day. So thank you very much. Madam Chair, trustees, today we present the monitoring report for Operational Expectation 3 instructional program. The data collected for this monitoring report applies to the 2020-2021 school year. As trustees are aware, one of the greatest challenges our CVE faces is the ongoing COVID pandemic and the impact it has had on our instructional environment during the school year and continues to this day. 2020-2021 saw ongoing disruptions through transitions between online and in-person learning. Having said that, I am quite pleased that this report highlights the continued efforts of teachers, principals, and administration to offer students opportunities to engage in rich learning experiences. I'm very pleased that for the first time in many years, CBE is able to report a balanced budget for transportation. Our staff and administration has worked to align processes and services to ensure service to our students while being prudent with our financial resources. The evidence presented in this report indicates compliance with 10 of the 11 indicators. Indicator 3.2.1 is not applicable to this report for this monitoring year. In September of 2020, the Board of Trustees approved revisions to Operational Expectation 3, which were in response to the ministerial order of May 21, 2020. The Board of Trustees approved new reasonable interpretations and indicators for OE3 in November 2020. The implementation of the new program evaluation framework commenced this school year. Therefore, no data is available for the 2020-21 school year for 3.2.1. At this time, Madam Chair, I'd invite Superintendent Speakman and Oloker to take you through the report and to answer any questions that trustees may have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chief Yusey. And now I'd like to invite Superintendent Speakman to speak. Superintendent Speakman.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chief Yusey. And now I'd like to invite Superintendent Speakman to speak.
Thank you, Chief Usi, Chair Hack, and trustees. As follow-up to Chief Usi's introduction, I'm pleased to highlight some of the key reporting points reflective of changes to OE3 as set out by trustees last year. First of all, through a review of school development plans, we confirmed the excellent work of principals and teachers in schools that identified specific instructional strategies or actions required to address student results. Additionally, this review of school development plans confirmed that the use of data, both provincial and specific to the school, resulted in active decisions for the instructional programs at schools. Schools engage in learning sprints, also known as adjustment cycles, through which a specific focus receives attention for a targeted period of time. This provides the opportunity to calibrate practices throughout the school and ensure that work is responsive to what students need. Additionally, we have provided a comprehensive overview of the work done to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 and still offer a variety of program that expands as students develop and move through grades. This is strongly evidenced through the summary of our off-campus, unique pathways and exploratory programs, including our dual credit programs and locally developed courses. As an added component of quality programming that is responsive and flexible, we also confirmed through area learning team referrals the continued access of the area and central supports for students according to the continuum of supports and services. Finally, and further to Chief Usi's opening around indicator 3.2.1, I'm pleased to share that the program evaluation framework implemented for the 2021-2022 monitoring report will operate at a systemic level and offer insight into the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of CBE programs by examining identified programs, ensuring our investment of resources are resulting in the intended and positive outcomes for all students. At this point, we welcome any questions you may have regarding Operational Expectation 3. Thank you.
Wonderful. The Operational Expectations Policy defines the degree of authority transferred to the Chief Superintendent as he makes day-to-day decisions. The Board of Trustees has previously reviewed the reasonable interpretations of this operational expectation and approved that the Chief Superintendent reasonably understands the values underlying this policy, and that the indicators previously provided by the Chief Superintendent are acceptable to the Board. I now invite any trustees who have questions about the report to offer them to the Chief Superintendent. Let me remind the Board that the purpose of considering this report is to satisfy the Board that its policy values were complied with during the 2020-2021 school year. I encourage trustees to limit their questions and comments in support of monitoring. Please go ahead, Trustee Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. So my first few questions are related specifically to the CTF and CTS course offerings that we have. In some cases, the number of students enrolled in each of those classes can be limited just because of the nature of the course. So when in taking into consideration things like safety, the level of supervision that's required for the activities, availability of equipment, workstations, and so on. So my first question is, were we able to meet the demand for these courses last year?
Through the chair, the ability to meet the course demands, given the restrictions that you've identified and those variables certainly does vary and depends on the location and number of settings where the course is offered to students. That said, how we seek to continue to mitigate that particular challenge is through our high school transfer process, which when students wish to pursue a specific pathway around some of those courses where that may not be possible within their current high school, that we look to provide that transfer should there be space and availability in those specific courses.
Thank you. I do have a follow-up question on that one as well in relation to the trades program. We see Within that program, 63% of students had special education codes, 16% are identified as Indigenous. We see these students who would qualify as at risk for not finishing courses or graduating, yet what we see is 96% of students in the trades program successfully complete the program. I would like to just comment how amazing this is. My question is, are there barriers to this program, whether it be physical? I know that you said that you would transfer those if possible, physical distance from where a student live, financial, whether it be program cost, if there is one, or having to pay busing, transportation fees.
Thank you, Chair Hack. And first of all, I appreciate your acknowledgement of how outstanding that particular demographic result is reported in the report. You've highlighted a number of barriers that certainly are present, though I'll outline perhaps the strategies that we have in an attempt to address each of those. The trades pathway in particular can present financial barriers such as tuition or materials, transportation, personal protective equipment, etc. And so students attend these particular programs from all over the city, and we try to mitigate that particular transportation issue by working in collaboration with the student's home high school and the supervising teacher of that trades pathway. And so students may receive travel accommodations such as bus tickets provided, or in some cases even access to cabs as well, pending what we're able to achieve between those programs. In the context of the Unique Pathways program, Unique Pathways also accesses via Education Matters a barrier removal grant for students who have demonstrated financial need, which allows them to access that programming free of charge, which is a significant support for this group of students and allows for that range of options to be available. Further to that, we do have supervising teachers attached to each of the programs, and in that we provide that transition support for students who are looking to transition between school, post-secondary learning, and or workplace training. And so they act as a bridge both between the industry partner and the student, as well as the homeschool, because there's also scheduling components that have to be considered, such as to be able to be engaged in a certain pathway, they may need to have a Thursday afternoon schedule available. I think what this demonstrates that while there are barriers, there's significant processes in place where we try to accommodate and look to address those scheduling, physical barriers and financial barriers in a way that's responsive to students and ensures that we truly do have full access wherever it possibly can be set out. So thank you.
Okay. Trustee Dennis has a follow-up question as well.
Great, thank you so much. And Superintendent Pittman, you alluded to the high school transfer process. And so I'm just wondering, were we able to accommodate most requests around this programming for high school transfers in order to get those students to the schools where they needed to be to access these programs? And I guess related to that then too, do we have any courses on our radar for expansion? And if so, do we have the staff capacity, facilities, or resources to be able to do that?
Through the chair, with respect to the high school transfer process, there are some courses or some schools more specifically where transfers are not allowed due to closed designations. That said, within that closed designation, there is always a component linked to specific courses that would be identified as viable to put forward a transfer request. There are limitations therein. Over and above what was done is, even if the transfer request couldn't be accommodated for the first choice, the intent was then to look where that same program may be offered elsewhere and then accommodate that request. And to my knowledge, the vast overwhelming majority of requests were accommodated in this manner when it was worked through by directors and through school principals as well. You asked a question around course expansion, and there are in fact 2 CTS courses, or I'll say more broadly, areas that are planned for expansion, and they're connected to our innovation technologies programs. Specifically, that would include things like robotics, electronics, the Internet of Things, pre-engineering, that particular cluster of courses, along with computer science programs. So this is an area that we are prioritizing and looking to how we can expand in the context of our current resources. And so to that end, and of course, this is a fairly complex system working with multiple service units, long-term planning must take place in developing that approach. And so that's something that's an ongoing component that we're looking to both manage in the immediate and also consider what the future looks like, especially as we link to the City of Calgary economy and what we see coming forward as opportunities for students.
Okay, as trustees have more questions, you can jump in the queue. Trustee Dennis, go ahead with your next question.
Thank you so much. This is my last question in that section of the report. And thank you so much, Superintendent Pittman, for that information. I'm excited to see some of the possible expansion coming our way to support our students. So that was great. I'm just wondering in terms of, I guess, along that same line around sort of sustainability and just wondering what plans we might have in place to be able to continue offering certain courses where, you know, we may be in a situation where our staff are retiring or moving on from the CBE and taking their expertise with them.
Through the chair, so I'll actually invite, there we are, Superintendent of HR, as like I said, it's a collaborative effort.
Thanks, Superintendent Pittman. Yeah, CTS, all of the staffing related is one of the core areas of focus in our teacher staffing process. So we're on a continuous basis looking for staff, not just in Alberta, but across the country that can work with that. One of the things we do is we hire instructors with trades backgrounds and then try to encourage them to enter into something called the Bridge to Teacher Certification Program. So we apply every year for grants to support staff in that. We've had 17 of those approved in the past 5 years, with only one not completing it and not becoming one of our permanent continuous teachers. And we've had 9 approved for the coming year, so we're continuing to focus on that as a way to bring people in. Another tool we utilize is mid-career. You know, typically these individuals are sort of mid-career when they make these decisions. So one of the tools we have available to us is to be able to hire them up the grid because we're able to count their service as a journeyman to count as a credit towards being able to be placed in the grid.
Thank you. Trustee May, go ahead.
My question's on the area learning team, so page 5-13 or 13 of 21. In regards to area learning teams, our mental health supports tracks, and are we seeing any gaps in our services from previous partnerships?
Thank you, Trustee May. And through the chair, so our area offices currently monitor the referrals and supports that occur through the area learning teams. And so they have their own tracking processes to do so. And then just sort of positioning it back, our school learning teams also would be working through referrals that they have that occur within their own school. And then they are able to track and have ongoing conversations about particular student needs within the school domain. So some of the student mental health needs that arise at the classroom, school, or system level that move through the area learning teams are then met by either internal or external, meaning centralized strategies and supports. And our students requiring further mental health related interventions really have access, if it's necessary, to a wide variety of professionals on our teams, which could be again at the school level, or could be through centralized services, could be provided by strategists, specialists, psychologists, or other therapists. And it's really important to note that mental health issues can sometimes expand beyond the mental health team into other service providers that we have within the CBE, which can include behavior support workers, family school liaison workers, and members of our therapy teams. But to address the second part of your question, Trustee May, we did used to have a provincial body called the Regional Collaborative Service Delivery, which was RCSD, and it was a partnership, and they were established provincially, partnerships that existed across ministries, specifically between health and education. So through that partnership, there was a provisioning of services for students, and some of that was in the mental health domain. And so since the removal of that 2 years ago, that has resulted in decreased mental health provisions that used to come through that model. The CBE has continued to provide services, although because of the partnership being discontinued, it is at a lesser rate than would have been previously. And it's also important just to note again that because we do have finite resources and are bound by our mandate, if there are mental health issues that arise either at an acute level or outside of the school day, that those often do get referred over to community or to health for support.
Thank you. And as trustees, jump the queue here. Got a question from Trustee Dennis.
Thank you very much. So Superintendent Armstrong, your answer to my last question, you mentioned the Bridge to Teaching certification program. So that has piqued my interest a little. I'm not sure if you mentioned, I'm assuming that this is offered through the University of Calgary, and I don't remember if you said that or not. But I'm wondering, I guess, around that, I mean, that's a great way for our system to be able to access the folks that we need with the expertise that we need them to have. I'm just wondering, do we have any ability to, I guess, what is our connection to the program ultimately? Do we have the ability to be able to provide feedback to them around, the type of expertise that we're looking for? I don't know a lot about the program, so now that you've mentioned that, I'm kind of interested in our ability to be able to access graduates of that program and be able to influence in terms of maybe they're seeking out people or students with the expertise we're looking for.
Through the chair, so the program's offered through the University of Alberta. So the funding comes from a grant from the government of Alberta. So we're constantly in contact with our high school principals through the teacher staffing area to understand what our ongoing needs are. It's not specifically designed for any particular thing. It allows somebody with a particular background to then get those qualifications they need to become a certificated teacher. So after 1 year, they have the ability to teach under a certain kind of provision, and then over time, they continue to get their B.Ed and then will become a fully certified teacher at that point. So it's an ongoing process of understanding what the needs are, bringing the individuals into our system typically as instructors to get that sort of technical background in, and then helping them build their educator background on top of that.
Thank you.
Okay. I do have a question in relation to on page 5, in indicator 3.3. Indicator 2, sorry, my apologies, where it says no proven allegations of non-compliance with the AR 3067 religion and education. My question is this something that students or parents can bring forward, more of that external viewpoint? And how would we know if students or parents have made a complaint in relation to AR 3067?
Chair Hack, with respect to AR 3067, just to clarify, it is that none of our programs are taught from the basis of religious teaching as opposed to teaching about religion, which does occur with respect to different components. So just providing that delineation. With respect to this particular indicator, principals confirm this through Action Manager as one component and have to identify and are expected to identify if there's any other variable that they have to account for that may result in this being non-compliant. Outside of that particular piece, our concerns and complaints process is also where any other element, whether it be by student or by a parent or guardian, that this type of concern or complaint would be brought forward with respect to AR 3067, which then is monitored both through area offices and then of course through the Office of the Chief.
Okay. Perfect. And as trustees jump in the queue, I'll give a couple more minutes. Trustee Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I have a few questions regarding the Fine and Performing Arts programming, and in particular with 2021 being, I guess, the first entire school year that was impacted by COVID, and with the various protocols that and restrictions that we needed to put in place to manage through that. My questions on the fine and performing arts section are all related to the impacts of COVID on those programs. So my first question is, with the implementation of the health and safety protocols, did we see a reduction in the number of course offerings in our fine and performing arts courses?
Through the chair, the short answer is yes, we saw a decline in both the number of course offerings as well as enrollment.
Trustee Dennis, go ahead with follow-up.
Great, thank you so much. All right, and I'm just wondering, how were we able to adjust in these subject areas to ensure that students were meeting the outcomes of the program with all the restrictions in place? We know that many changes were put in place around what they could and could not do, and it did impact their learning. I'm just wondering how we were able to adjust to make sure that they met the outcomes of the program.
Through the chair, certainly, I just want to make sure my previous shortened response is that that decline in offering and enrollment absolutely was linked to the availability of that, and flexibility within scheduling should not be a reflection on the level of interest or desire to offer. So just want to provide that caveat, and then segue over to some of the things that were adjusted to continue this work, and certainly that changed and was adjusted over the course of the 2020-21 school year. For elementary music teachers, one of the ways that we ensured we were still able to leverage specialists in those positions is they would offer homeroom-based general music classes, as opposed to, because students were in strict cohorts. So it was readjustments of those schedules where those teachers were traveling to homeroom classes specifically, rather than accessing a music room or a band room. For middle school or junior high contexts, teachers offered by offering a range of portions of what would have been linked to that curriculum to their homeroom classes on what's called a wheel schedule. So shorter time frames that would allow for and not dilute the quality of what could be offered in a concentrated time frame, to ensure there was still access. High school teachers had probably the most significant adjustments that they undertook, given the in-depth nature of that programming and the heavy reliance on performance-based elements that are directly linked to the program of studies. And so they offered a lot of hands-on activities within the limits of the risk mitigation requirements that were set in place. And they also, we were able to thankfully shift to ensuring that class configurations and physical distancing could be achieved, no shared supplies, no group work. They had timing, they were timing who was performing when and for how long. All of those components were set in place to create the greatest access to the curricular outcomes and achieving all of those goals that are reflected in, especially in the fine and performing arts that were related to band, choir, instrumental music, and the like.
Thank you.
Okay. I have another question here, page 17, 3.4, indicator 2. We say that we have mechanisms are in place to administer penalties to contracted carriers for instances of unreliability, such as tardiness or absence. I know that throughout the pandemic, we've had different issues arising from busing. My question is, were there any penalties administered in the 2020-2021 school year?
Good afternoon, Chair Hack. For the 2021 school year, there were rather few penalties administered. They totaled approximately $5,000. I think that's a reflection probably of the fact that the pandemic at that point in time was maybe a little less contagious, because just to contrast it with this school year thus far, of course, the school year not yet completed, we've also already administered penalties of over $40,000 and had 25 routes that were reassigned to other service providers. So a little bit of comparison.
I appreciate being able to compare that. I know that this report is just in relation to the 2020-2021 school year. So I appreciate that you also had the numbers ready for what is already part of this school year. Trustees, do you have any more questions in relation to OE3? Trustee Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So my last few questions are specifically related to the Unique Pathways Dual Credit and Exploratory course offerings. So can you please provide a couple of examples of these programs and the partners involved in making them happen? And I know we have quite a few. I'm just looking for to highlight a few.
Through the chair, with respect to the nature of the dual credit or unique pathway programs, certainly they all sit within clusters. So whether we're talking about computer science, some of the healthcare aid components, we have some exciting agricultural partnerships as well. And what I would highlight for program partners, our post-secondary institutions are certainly a significant player. SAIT, Mount Royal University, Olds College, and U of C. From the industry perspective, we have excellent partnerships with local union groups, the Teatro Group, Marriott Hotels, organizations like Careers the Next Generation and Calgary Zoo are other important partners as well. And so as we look to continue, I apologize, I forgot to turn on my video. As we look to continue to explore how we can create surety of those pathways, that's a really important component when we design any program. So we'll often test something out for a year with a partner and see how it may be expanded or managed in the context of our current resources, because certainly there's a great deal of groundwork that must be laid for all of these programs, and to ensure that we're also meeting the needs of students that perhaps would not historically choose post-secondary as their pathway, but this may be that entry point differently. So it's a great opportunity and one we take very seriously.
Thank you. Trustee Dennis, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. So just, I mean, these are some of the most exciting programs that we have, just in having opportunities even just to speak to students. Of course, not during COVID, but before COVID, being able to connect with some of these students that are involved in these programs. I know how much they appreciate them, and in so many ways they're life-changing for some of our students. So just a couple of things, do we do anything to sort of promote these programs, I guess? And do we have capacity to meet existing demand?
I'll maybe tackle your first question and then move to how we promote. We are at capacity for all of our programming, which is great news. That's our goal. We want to be at capacity, and need to continue to look at how we support expansion. By expansion, I don't necessarily mean new programs, but creating new spaces within the existing programs, because as I alluded to earlier, it's no small amount of effort on both our partners' part as well as our own to create new programs, but we're looking to leverage new spaces where we are able to. With respect to how we promote programs, fundamentally, there are a range of structures that exist system-wide. So school messenger updates that go out to all high school parents. I've received those as a high school parent of what those opportunities are. As well, there's specific points through schools. So our student services in each of our high schools are kept up to date using bi-monthly meetings so that they know what's upcoming, because some of these are new. There's a new opportunity or a space opens up. So great efforts are taken to make sure everyone is aware. Parent and student information sessions are often offered, and I will say have become more accessible because they're now online versus at a place. Presentations as well to the Senior High School Principals Association, making sure that all elements or levels of the organization are aware. And then our off-campus coordinators also meet monthly at high schools, and so through that, they are further coordinating and identifying what other opportunities are available. And then more broadly speaking, our registration process. So we have the Get Ready, Get Set, Get Go high school registration guide, which parents should have received recently as we're moving into planning for September of 2022. That particular guide highlights all of those opportunities that we make available. And as always, access to our student services as a first point of contact is something that's really an important leverage point for us.
Thank you. Trustee Dennis, go ahead with follow-up.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the reminder on that that guide. It's been a few years since I've had a child in high school in CBE, but I definitely remember seeing those guides and thinking what a tremendous amount of course offerings we have for our high schoolers. Just my last, I guess, couple of questions on this area is, are these opportunities in these courses available to all students who might wish to participate? And are there any prerequisites that might need to be met in order for participation in certain programs?
Through the chair, I think I would underscore that Unique Pathways opportunities are available to any student in a CBE high school, and any student can apply for their program of interest. There are some dual credit programs that do have prerequisites, such as a minimum of 16 years of age, depending, for exploratory pipe trades, as you can imagine, or you may have had to have taken biology 20 or 30 before the start date of the dual credit course offered in anatomy and physiology. That said, one of the priorities of the central team is to work with partners to make these prerequisites minimal and attainable wherever possible. And that's how we have to really prioritize which opportunities we make available so that we can increase and have the greatest access, as well as support that effective completion rate.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
If there are no more questions from trustees, I'll give it a second here. We'll continue on. Seeing none, we now come to the point where trustees are asked to identify their intentions to bring forward any motions related to the compliance with these operational expectations. Any trustees who wish to bring forward a motion regarding expectations to findings, the evidence to be compliant, or a motion of accommodation for the exceptional performance in a particular area should provide the corporate secretary and all trustees with proposed motions by noon Thursday, February 17th, 2022. If there are no exceptions or accommodations, then this item will be placed on the consent agenda for the February 17th, 2022 board meeting, with the motion that the Board of Trustees approves that the Chief Superintendent is in compliance with the provisions of OE3 instructional program. Next on our agenda is the annual monitoring of results 2 academic success. At the January 11th and 25th public board meetings, trustees had the opportunity to ask questions regarding this report. The report is now on the agenda for the board to consider whether the Chief Superintendent is making reasonable progress with the provisions of Results 2 academic success. It is the board's responsibility to consider the report as evidence of reasonable organizational progress in the results area. The board has previously approved the reasonable interpretations and indicators for this results policy, which has set the stage for effective monitoring of actual organizational performance. I would like to remind trustees that today our job is to determine whether or not the report provides sufficient evidence that the CBE has made reasonable progress towards achieving this result, and to build a portfolio of the Chief Superintendent's performance in the results half of the Chief Superintendent's job expectations. I would request a trustee bring forward a motion regarding this report. Trustee Vukadinovich, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hack. I would like to move that the Board of Trustees has reviewed the monitoring report for Results 2 academic success and concludes that reasonable progress is being made toward the ultimate achievement of this results policy.
Do trustees have any questions about the motion? Seeing none, the motion on the floor is that the Board of Trustees has reviewed the monitoring reports for results 2, academic success, and concludes the reasonable progress is being made toward the ultimate achievement of this results policy. Trustee Downey, go ahead.
I would like to propose an amendment to the motion on the floor to include the following words: with the exception of students who self-identify as Indigenous in all academic areas.
Do trustees have any questions about the amendment? The proposed amendment on the floor is, with the exception of students who self-identify as Indigenous in all academic areas. Trustee Downey, would you please open debate on the proposed amendment?
Thank you, Chair Hack. The mission of the CBE reads as such: each student, in keeping with their individual abilities and gifts, will complete high school with a foundation of learning necessary to thrive in life, work, and continued learning. There are 3 central values to the CBE, the first of which is students come first, and that we believe that everyone can learn. Each student is unique and worthwhile. We acknowledge, recognize, and celebrate the diversity of our learners. Success for each and every student is the goal of our work. We often hear at the CBE that together we commit to success for each student every day, no exceptions. I am offering an amendment to this motion because while Results Report 2 shows excellent results for many students, it does not demonstrate reasonable progress toward the ultimate achievement of this results policy for students who self-identify as Indigenous. The January 1st, 2022 Results Monitoring Report states our Chief Superintendent acknowledges that he is making reasonable progress with the exception being results for students who self-identify as Indigenous. In the executive summary analysis of this same report, it is stated, there is a significant gap between the report card results of students who self-identify as Indigenous and all students. Work is currently underway that was not in place over the duration of this report. It is my hope that the Holistic Lifelong Learning Framework, the System-Wide Indigenous Education Professional Learning Day, and other system and school-based supports, as well as the implementation of new and responsive measures, will begin to show changes in the results reports for students that self-identify as Indigenous. For these reasons, I ask my fellow trustees to consider this amendment.
Thank you. Are there trustees who wish to enter first round of debate? Trustee Close, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hack. I have a bit to say. We'll see what happens. I can certainly support this exception, but perhaps for different reasons than expected. I did watch last year's board debate on results, and I was captivated by the idea that if all students aren't successful, if one fails, we all fail, then are we making progress? And I've also mused about whether we're making reasonable progress when results don't favorably compare with the province, or for that matter, with results of other jurisdictions. And because I strongly believe that student success equals community success, and that being a core value that underpins the importance of public education, that connection also supports my belief that we need the support of the whole community to ensure student success. So here I am, I'm thinking about what success is, what progress is, which means I have to go to our existing policy for guidance on those definitions. And I find myself reflecting on the need to talk about all of our results, academic results, character, citizenship, personal development, all at the same time, rather than separately, because it's the whole student that comes to school to learn. So I'm wondering about our indicators of success, and I know we're not having that conversation today, but I'm just trying to go through my thinking and the need to talk about reading readiness or attendance or requests for support or transitions to new schools or student voice and student belonging and connection, and yes, of course, high school completion. And I'm also challenged and feeling awkward and inadequate to even talk about success for self-identified Indigenous students without having their voices in the room. It's an uncomfortable power dynamic to pass judgment, and I would prefer listening and honoring. However, there is no question in my mind that disaggregated data helps monitor who we serve, and it also helps put students at the center, and it helps to achieve equity and support for all students for success. But our present policy and indicators don't support that actual necessary conversation on equity at the board level, the necessary conversation around anti-racism, the need to implement TRC calls to action. We had a beautiful presentation today from schools. The need to talk about justice and inequality, the need for each and every student to build a life of dignity and prosperity. I might end with this, and I'll probably enter a second round of debate, but from a CBE and system of schools perspective, I think great work is being done to support the success of each and every student every day, no exceptions. And I think the shift to the development of frameworks that are research informed will obviously go a long way to closing the educational achievement gap and improving high school completion rates. But I do have more to say, but I might save that for second round.
Thank you. Trustee May, go ahead.
I can really appreciate the discussion around like the whole student. But I think this, Trustee Downey's recommendation, I think is important. I think we still have a cohort that, you know, we're not getting a 50% high school graduation rate until year 5. And I think that's something to be said about how we're supporting students throughout. And so I'm happy to see the SLPs, I'm happy to see the community, I'm happy to see how we're engaging all our students. But I think looking at the results from last year in this report, I think we're just still quite not there yet. And I'm hoping that we see the change because it does seem to be flowing through policy through individual schools, and I hope to see that change. But I just report card data and looking at the high school graduation rate, I think we're just still quite not there yet.
Thank you. Any other trustees wishing to enter first round of debate? Trustee Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you. Our students that identify as Indigenous are not yet achieving where we would like them to, and I am supportive of the steps the Chief has taken to improve the success of this cohort of students. We have yet to see the full impact of the Indigenous Education Holistic Lifelong Learning Framework, and as we all know, this is a new framework with a very targeted approach. I have every confidence that through that framework, we will not only see our Indigenous students' academic achievement improve, but that we will also learn a lot about how to support all students in the most effective ways. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize the incredible work being done in our system, as so beautifully demonstrated through the school presentation today. That was tremendously encouraging, and it's exciting to see the development of this work moving forward in our system. In looking at the results for the 2020-21 school year, I would like to point out a few key observations in the academic achievement of this cohort of students. We saw improvement in results for divisions 1, 2, and 3 in languages, physical education, science, social studies, and English language arts. We also saw results maintained or improved in CTF and CTS, Fine and Performing Arts, and French language arts in some divisions. Mathematics is an outlier where we see a decrease in 3 of 4 divisions. We did see a slip in Division 4 across all subject areas, with the exception of CTF and CTS, where essentially we maintained our results. I would note, however, that our Division 4 results saw the most notable declines in all cohorts for the 2020-21 school year. Turning to graduation rates, we also saw a narrowing of the gap as compared to all student cohorts in our 3- and 5-year graduation rates. And as compared to the province, we are narrowing the gap in our 3-year graduation rate. While I acknowledge that we still have work to do, we also have reason to be encouraged. In closing, I would say that I am proud of this cohort of students for the work that they are doing to support their own learning, for the work that their families are doing to support their students, and I'm very grateful for the educators that continue to support these students every day.
Okay, are there any other trustees wishing to enter first round of debate for the amendment? Seeing none, we will move to a second round of debate. Any trustees wishing to enter or re-enter for second round? Trustee Close, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hack, and thank you, Trustee Dennis. I want to echo every word you just shared and add these points that I think as a policy board, as elected trustees, we can see the values underlying CARES initiative, the Collaboration for Anti-Racism and Equity Supports, values like equity, access, excellence, justice, diversity, collaboration, representation. I think those are values that we need to have a conversation about at the board level in order to monitor results. And so I'm excited about where we can go in the future of adapting our policies to reflect the good work that is actually being measured in our schools and reported on in the annual education results report. I loved receiving that report. I found it so holistic in nature. But back to the exception. Yes, I can support this amendment. Thank you, Trustee Downey, for bringing it forward. It is the tool and the process we have for existing policy, and I'm very hopeful for future success for all of our students, including those that self-identify as Indigenous.
Thank you. Trustees wishing to enter a second round of debate. Trustee Dennis?
Sorry, not a debate. This is just a question. During Trustee Close's comments, there was a lot of static, and I just don't know if it was just me hearing that or if it was everywhere. If it was just me, I will log back on and log back off to see if I can clean it up.
I also heard static on her end.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Trustee May? Yeah, we heard static.
So I think I'll kind of echo what Trustee Close was saying. This amendment is a tool that we have. I think our admin has done a fabulous job with next steps, and looking forward to really improving this cohort and making reasonable progress. I don't think we're getting towards I don't think we're making reasonable progress looking at the data in front of us, and we're not getting towards the desirable results right now. And so I think while I can appreciate that we're going through a lot and that our educators are doing as much as they can, I think I'm going to vote in favor of this amendment.
Yeah, I'll enter and echo Trustee Close and Trustee May. These are the tools that we have and through the processes that we have to make amendments like this. Administration acknowledges that they're not there yet. Those who self-identify as Indigenous aren't there yet. So this shouldn't come as a shock or surprise to administration or to us in bringing forward this amendment. I believe I can support it for those reasons. Any other trustees wishing to enter a second round of debate? Seeing none. Trustee Downey, do you wish to close debate, please?
Thank you, Chair Hack. And I'd just like to again acknowledge all of the wonderful work that is happening currently, and to remind ourselves that we are looking back at a previous school year and the results reports for the 2020-2021 school year. So on pages 20 and 22 of 84 of Results Report 2, we see a comparison of report card results across divisions 1, 2, 3, and 4, starting in 2018 to 2021 in English, Language Arts, and Mathematics between the All Students cohort and the students who self-identify as Indigenous cohort. Over a 3-year average across all divisions, the All Students cohort scored over 25% higher, and in some cases over 29% higher, than the students who self-identify as Indigenous cohort. In the 2020-2021 school year, the All Students cohort scored on average 22% higher in both science and social studies than the students who self-identify as Indigenous cohort. Although we are seeing some slight improvement, the data suggests that there remains a significant gap between the academic achievement of all students and students who self-identify as Indigenous. The data that I have presented shows us there is much work to be done to remove barriers and to meaningfully support the learning of students who self-identify as Indigenous. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to now vote on, just a reminder, the amendment. I'll now call on each of you individually to indicate whether you are in favor or opposed to the amendment. Trustee Bolger.
In favor.
Trustee Close.
In favor.
Trustee Dennis.
In favor, thank you.
Trustee Downey.
In favor.
Trustee May.
In favor.
Trustee Vukadinovich.
In favor.
I vote in favor of the amendment. The amendment is carried unanimously. We'll now go back to the main motion. For clarity, the main motion as amended on the floor for the board's consideration is that the Board of Trustees has reviewed the monitoring report for results 2 academic success and concludes that reasonable progress is being made toward the ultimate achievement of this results policy, with the exception of students who self-identify as Indigenous in all academic areas. Trustee Vukadinovich, would you please open debate?
Yes. One of the reasons I ran for this position is because the Calgary Board of Education is a world-class school board, offering families in Calgary the advantage of the best education available in Calgary. I chose the CBE for my kids because we have some of the best educators in the country working for our kids, and because I know that Calgarians who graduate from CBE schools have the advantage of receiving a firm foundation in academics and character building and more. Just to mention a few of the many ways that CBE has been recognized as one of the best in the past. Of Alberta's 61 boards, the outcomes of CBE students rank in the top 5 according to the 2019 McKinnon Panel on Alberta's Finances. The most recent results from 2018 from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, so OECD, their Program for International Student Assessment, the PISA exam, that the PISA exam indicates that CBE students rank number 3 in the world in both science and reading and in the top 10 in mathematics. CBE schools are always in the top 10 list of schools ranked by the Fraser Institute. CBE students have outperformed the province as a whole on provincial achievement tests, the PATs, and diploma exams for many years. Continuous improvement, continuous monitoring and continuous improvement are both essential to upholding and building on the CBE's reputation as the best in Calgary, which is why I am pleased to see that this monitoring report on the CBE's results in academic success for the 2020-21 school year illustrates what administration humbly, judiciously, and conservatively identifies as reasonable progress towards achieving the desired results of academic success. When I read through this report, overall, I see evidence that real learning took place in our CBE classrooms last year, this despite a global pandemic. I note that administration themselves identify that there is an exception to this reasonable progress, and I thank Trustee Downey for bringing forth the amendment that recognizes this exception. The results for our CBE students who self-identify as Indigenous are not where we would like to see them. And I support that this is an issue that needs continued prioritization. We must find a way to work together to move the needle on the academic results of students who self-identify as Indigenous. We must persist, but I'm also happy to recognize the great work we have done on behalf of our students overall. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there trustees who wish to enter first round of debate? Trustee Close, go ahead.
Let me know if you can hear me properly before I start.
We still have static.
Well, maybe what I'll do is I'll let someone else go ahead and I'll try and leave and come back. I don't know how else to fix it.
Okay. We will come back to you when you get back on, but we'll go to the next. That was quick. Trustee Close, would you like to try again?
Sure. How is it this time? Not better.
It's a little bit less. We still are able to hear you. There is static.
I apologize for that. I don't know how else to correct it. So I'll be brief. There's no question in my mind about the great work that our school system is doing in support of academic success. And others have highlighted the many examples that we can be proud of. I think not only has the report showed us progress, but oh my goodness, progress in a very difficult and uncertain year of unfinished learning. I'm still going to beat the drum about the data that we have in front of us, but I do feel that it's such a tremendous place where we're finding ourselves, because as I personally reflect back on being a member of boards that created some of our policy governance framework that actually galvanized our school system to talk as a system about student success. I know that there is big work, incredibly important and focused work happening in each of our schools in support of student success. And I look forward to many more school presentations that help us capture that magic of curiosity and learning of both students and teachers working together to track the progress of how we can best know our students and best know their needs. I think we can easily align our results policies, and now you're hearing my old 14-year-old dog walk into the room, with the education plan. And I'm really excited about the necessity and the opportunity to have our results policy catch up to measure what is valuable and to address systemic issues related to academic achievement and high school completion. So I'm excited because I believe we have an opportunity this year to reimagine, an opportunity for a new way to think about data, a new way to gather it and make meaning of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any trustees wishing to enter first round of debate? Trustee May, go ahead.
So while I know with our student report card results, we're just looking at 3 years of data. But from what I've read and watched previous board reports and kind of seen the background of this, I think the focus has been on English language arts and within mathematics. It's with our education plan, it's at the local school, and I think it's really made a difference. We've seen growth throughout everyone, it seems, through the English language arts and mathematics, and I think that's progress, and that's reasonable progress. And I think our students and our families have been through a lot, and to see growth, I think is encouraging. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that continue in the future.
Any other trustees? While waiting, I'm going to give my thoughts on this. I guess here's where my head is at. Looking at these results and what this policy entails, I still feel as if we're failing students who identify as Indigenous. By the measures from Div 1 to Div 4, our graduation rates, this cohort is way below that of the all students cohort. We've been saying this for 6 years now, and yet cannot figure out how to increase those grades or graduation rates. Purely looking at the data, we see students falling through the cracks, and I struggle with that because that's not okay. We've been saying to administration, the board's been saying to administration, you're failing in this regard year after year. And I would pose that isn't this the exact definition of insanity? We're doing the same things, expecting different results. And it's true, the board is asking for the same measures, and administration to this point hasn't done anything drastically different. But that still holds true for the 2020-2021 school year that we're looking at. But, and it's a big but, I want to commend administration for implementing a change this current school year with the Indigenous Education Holistic Lifelong Learning Framework. So we're going to see change throughout next year's results. I would now offer that we're failing our administration in what we have asked them to provide if we keep asking for the same thing. It's not like we don't look at these exact results as a province asks for this in the context of the annual education results reporting. But I'm still torn knowing that we need to monitor last year's results, but knowing what's coming is so exciting. We are going to go to second round of debate as I don't see anybody else entering first round. Are there any trustees wishing to enter or re-enter for second round of debate? Trustee Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll just highlight a couple of things. First of all, we saw a statistically significant increase in the 3-year graduation rate for our students who self-identify as Indigenous. We almost closed the gap in the 5-year graduation rate as compared to the province for students with special education needs, and achieved a higher rate than the province for those same groups of students in our 4-year graduation rate. Our English language learners maintained or increased their results in almost all subjects across divisions 1, 2, and 3. We did see some challenges in our results for our Division 4 students across all cohorts, but the reasons for this were clearly articulated through the answers from administration to our questions while verifying the evidence in this report. When we consider all cohorts in all 3 years, we have decreased the gap between the CBE and the province in 6 of 12 measures at a rate that is statistically significant. I would also add that because we represent 1 out of every 6 students in the province, provincial results are significantly impacted by the results of our students. The board has been intentional around having 3 cohorts identified individually in this report: English language learners, students who identify as Indigenous, and students with identified special education needs. We have done this in order to bring focused attention to the results of these cohorts so we can identify where any achievement gaps might be. And this has been a very useful tool in our ability to monitor results for these groups of students, and as evidenced by our ability to be able to point to certain cohorts of students and ask administration to do something different, which they are doing. I would also note for trustees that while contained in this motion is an exception specific to our Indigenous student results, there are a few cases where results for our students who have identified special education needs are quite comparable to those results of students who identify as Indigenous. And while we are on a positive trajectory with this cohort of students, this may be something that the board wishes to keep an eye on. When determining reasonable progress, in another year where students and their learning was impacted by a global pandemic and all of the disruption that comes along with it, the questions I have were 2. Are we responding to students based on where they are at and supporting their success as best we can? And the second question, is what I am seeing reasonable progress under the circumstances that existed during the reporting period? I believe the evidence contained in this report supports my being able to answer yes to both of those questions. Our students and their educators have been managing through remarkable circumstances with unprecedented disruptions to teaching and learning. The fact that we maintained achievement in some areas is significant, and where we managed to increase could almost be described as extraordinary. So I would like to offer my heartfelt thanks and appreciation to all of our system leaders and educators for the support that they're giving to their students every day, and also like to acknowledge the incredible efforts put forward by our students and their families through a year last year that was difficult and, like I said, unprecedented disruptions, and they should be congratulated for their results. Thank you.
Trustee Vukadinovic, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hack. I found that incredible how Trustee Dennis just, the points she made, I fully support them, and I will not be as eloquent as Trustee Dennis has been, but I am uncomfortable with the sense that based on the results that we're seeing, that it indicates that our staff has failed, or that our students who self-identify as Indigenous have been failing, or that their parents, their families, that they've been failing. I am not seeing this as an example of insanity of doing the same thing and without results. I am seeing results. They don't happen overnight, and I'm proud of the teachers.
Sorry, Trustee Vukadinovic.
Yeah.
As you haven't been asked to close yet, can I get you to pause and restart after everybody who's had a chance to enter?
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry. Are there any trustees wishing to enter second round debate? Go ahead, Trustee Downey.
Thank you, Chair Hack and fellow trustees, for this thoughtful debate. For some final thoughts from me, I heard a comparison of our students who self-identify as Indigenous cohort with our special education cohort as well. And I would like to point out that across all divisions 1 through 4 in science and social studies, that students who self-identify as Indigenous are scoring lower in every cohort, in every division in those subjects compared to our students who are identified as special education. So while we are applauding all of the efforts that are occurring now and have occurred in the past as well, I'm hoping that trustees are able to shine a light on this area in this results report specifically. And of course, we are not being disparaging to any of the work of the CBE, any of the work of students or families, simply shining the light in hopes of improvement. So thank you very much, and thank you for all of your debate, trustees.
Trustees, second round of debate. I'll enter second round of debate here. Had you asked me a year ago, not knowing what was coming down the line from administration, I would say that we are failing our students. From measuring, looking at all of this data and measuring it equally to the all students cohort. But administration has done something differently now, and I think for us it's going to be really important after June to see how this first year went with the new framework. I would like to see the board work closely with administration and the impact that framework was had for our students, as we as the board need to make changes to our results 2 policy to reflect the work and monitor meaningful outcomes that are equity based. We as a board play a role and need to work on decolonizing how we view education. Administration has done some of the work and now it's our turn. The board should consider a development session on learning about the new framework and the effect it has had as we have a new baseline, and they need to consider how to implement changes on how we monitor. So I think I've landed, but by failing this motion, we aren't telling administration anything we don't know and are working on changing that doesn't get to the root of this issue, which is how do we help students be successful. I am happy to vote in favor of the motion with the exception because I believe that progress is being made, especially under circumstances of COVID and knowing what's coming in the future. And to me, that's really exciting that we are starting to change and not keep things the same. And to me, that matters. As I see nobody else in the queue, I will ask Trustee Vukadinovich to close here, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hack. I am planning to vote in favor of this motion with the amendment, and I encourage my fellow trustees to do the same. Again, when I look at the report, real learning has occurred in our classrooms in 2020, 2021, and the motion with the amendment is an accurate representation of the good work that happened in our classrooms. Thank you.
I will now call on each of you individually to indicate whether you are in favor or opposed to the motion. Trustee Bolger.
In favor, thank you.
Trustee Close.
In favor.
Trustee Dennis.
In favor, thank you.
Trustee Downey.
In favor.
Trustee May.
In favor.
Trustee Vukadinovich.
Thank you.
I vote in favor of the motion. The motion is carried unanimously. That brings us to the consent agenda of our meeting. All items not removed from the consent agenda will be deemed to be approved with the agenda. Next on our agenda is item 9.2.2, construction project status report. I have some questions for administration on this report. My questions are in relation to the North High School. My first question is, do we have a date set for this school to be handed over to CBE?
Madam Chair, I will invite Superintendent Brecken to respond to your question.
Thank you, Superintendent Usi. Chair Hack, such an easy question, and now I'm going to get into a long, convoluted answer. So from the very start, the government has recognized the enrollment pressures being lived within the Calgary Board of Education and have established, as part of the contractual requirements, the need for this school to be delivered in time to open for September of 2023. Having said that, having opened 30 schools over the past 6 years, and having had 2 of those, of course, being high schools, we're quite cognizant of the challenge that that poses. And so right from the outset, to manage expectations, we have been indicating September 2024 as a potential opening, with, of course, a certain amount of bated breath, as we hope that maybe we can actually be able to deliver and open that school for September 23. So it is still very early to be determining whether or not that school will be completed on time. We have to keep in mind that, notwithstanding when the contractor is actually finished, that then after that, there's typically about 3 months worth of work for a high school that's required by the school jurisdiction. And so what that is essentially the placement of all of the furniture, the equipment, the connections of the Wi-Fi system, and the bringing in of information technology devices for staff and students. Multitude of work that has to happen. So that is further compounded by the fact that, unlike elementary or middle schools, where we have a little bit more of flexibility if there is a delay because of how we can open the school as a school within a school, high school really doesn't lend itself to that. One, our high schools are full. We know that they're getting fuller, and that was part of the reason we did the high school engagement. So we can't just take 1,800 students and place them temporarily in another high school, because our other high schools wouldn't be able to accommodate that. And then add to that the additional complexity of each student and their programming. So, the different electives they might select, the career and technology studies that might be available at the temporary school, but not available at the new school, or vice versa when it opens. So this is going to be a decision that's going to be needed to be taken at a later date to confirm whether or not we'll be able to, we feel confident in the fact that the school will actually be able to open in September of 23, or whether we'll have to open that for 24. Of course, everybody doing their darndest to see if we can make 23 happen.
Yes, I understand there's quite a bit of work that goes on within the school to be ready for students to be there. I just clarification. So if we have the school handed over to us as finished from the builder by May, are we able to open? You said 3 months before, or are you talking 3 months before end of the school year to have it open? I know that budget also plays a role in this, because we need different numbers of administration and program planning, etc.
So Chair Hack, essentially, if we can have possession of that school for June of 2023, we will be able to open that school for September of 2023. That will give us the time that is required. The less time we have, then the more compressed the work is, and the more of a challenge it is to be able to open it with everything available for students and maximizing their learning opportunities. So that's right now the contractual delivery date is, or the substantial completion date, and the date that Alberta Infrastructure is working towards to give that school over to us is June of 2023. But again, it is still very early.
Well, I hope they can meet that date so that students are being well served within their community. Trustee Dennis has a question.
Thank you very much. So just want to check in, I guess, on the Skyview Ranch construction project. I know that earlier in the project we experienced some challenges that caused a bit of a delay and had to sort of shift gears a little bit in the construction process. So I just want to make sure, or I guess ask, do we foresee any other challenges at this time, or are we thinking we're kind of moving straight ahead now?
Through the chair, as we shared with families in December of 2021 on this school in particular, we are cautiously optimistic that it will be able to open on September 1st, but we are monitoring it very closely. This is of the 4 schools that we have scheduled to open for September of 2022. This is the one that is keeping us all awake the most at night. Our intent is to be able to communicate by April to families as to whether or not a contingency plan will have to be implemented. And what I mean by a contingency plan, it's a reference back to essentially one opportunity, or one option, I should say, is the school within the school plan that I've referenced previously, where we do keep the students with their teacher together, but they're in another school, and then when the school is ready, then all of those classes move together into that one new school, so that there is no change to the students' peers, there's no change to the students' teacher, they still have that great connection. The only thing that's new is their environment. Another possibility, and this is something that we've also done in other circumstances where the delay was less, was that maybe there was a delay of opening for a week of the school. And so instead of starting school on September 1st, maybe school starts after the labor long weekend, and then away everybody goes. And in some other cases, when the impact was even less, we were able to open the school, but maybe the gymnasium wasn't available for the first month, and then physical education had to be conducted either outdoors or in other common spaces within the school to mitigate against the loss or the lack of a gymnasium. So those are the kinds of scenarios that we'll be going through. We'll be making a decision in April, and then making that known in the spring to the public as to what they can expect. An opening is hopefully, of course, what we all want on September 1st.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions on the construction project status report? Seeing none, the board has 2 land and 6 strategic planning matters to deal with in camera following the public portion of this meeting. That brings us to the conclusion of this portion of the agenda. I would like to thank all of you who joined us for the meeting. Our next public board meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022.